Hi, Tracy. Good morning. Nice to see you on with us. Did you make it back home? Good morning, everybody, on this wonderful Wednesday. Here in Oklahoma, the Lord is replenishing the earth with rain and more rain. Slow, steady, soaking rain. I think we got another half inch overnight, a little bit more than a half an inch, maybe. Oh, Tom just told me it's not a wonderful Wednesday. It's a terrific Tuesday. Huh, that was a day ahead of myself. Oh my goodness, June 7th. Did I read the right day? Oh my goodness, that's good. Well, that's what happens when I travel. I've been on the road nonstop, and I sure am grateful for all the girls that fill in for me. Debbie will be with us the end of this week. I'll be on today. Debbie and I'll be on together tomorrow. And then Debbie's going to take it for me Thursday and Friday as I travel to San Antonio in business. We were in Arkansas last week and Salina, Kansas a week before that. We'll be going to St. Louis. We'll be going to North Carolina. I think we're going to Georgia. I think we're going to, I don't even know where all we're going, actually. It's the busy time of year, but you know what? It was just a short time ago that when I would have to travel like that, I would just put out a notice on Facebook that we won't be having Bible study. And was just a short time ago, we didn't have Bible study on the weekends. And God planted it in Debbie's heart to step in and help out. And then Lori and Michelle, and I'm so grateful. We're working on starting a noonday Bible study. It'll be a little bit different format, but we're going to do that. I hope before the end of the summer, I hope to have that in place. So looking forward to that. Love reading our daily Bible. I'm Elizabeth Sharon Ann. It's the Elizabeth Sharon Ann page. I have a personal page, Elizabeth Inman, but they limit how many friends you can have on your personal page. So you have to create a public page. So Elizabeth Sharon Ann is what I chose to go with for the ministry. We have Elizabeth Inman Ministries as our 501c3, and we do business as Dream Big Ministries. We do Dream Big retreats. We have a couples retreat coming up at the end of this month at Fall River, Kansas, out in the middle of nowhere. There's this beautiful, wonderful high-end. Go ahead, come sit with me. Oh, okay. He doesn't want to be on camera. Hunting and fishing resort that only opens its doors to the public during the summertime. And last year, our couples went there for their couples Dream Big retreat, and we're going back again this year. And if last year's any indication, oh man, it was powerful and so good. You know, there's just something about getting together with like-minded believers and breaking bread and waking up in the mornings and having breakfast together. It's powerful. It's powerful. And I thank all of you who contribute to this ministry to help us give out Bibles. We've got more and more requests. In fact, Donna, don't let me forget. I think I've got a couple of requests for Bibles that I need to get to you. It's just incredible what God does. It just is incredible what God does. Tom and I prayed on the way to Arkansas, and I mean, the scripture where God says that just trust me in this and see if I don't open up the heavens and pour out blessings on you. We experienced that, I'm telling you. And I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that it was because we paused and we prayed. And then we spoke life and we spoke faith, and the blessings were beyond anything I could have imagined. It's just the power of prayer. The power of prayer. Oh. And then here we are, 1 Kings chapter 2, going through chapter 3, verse 2. And once again, this can be some pretty tough reading. The Kings is tough reading. We see the end of King David's life. We see Solomon take over. We see what was required of Solomon to take over. And then we're in Acts, where we see two proclaimed believers deceiving the church that dropped dead. And then we end with some wonderful promises in the Psalms. And then it's almost like the Proverbs wraps it all up for us today. So let's dig in a little bit today. So King David is issuing his final words today. He's lived a long, full life. The Bible spells it out for us in great detail. The Chronicles actually gets a lot more detailed than the book of Kings does about David's life. But my goodness, we see a man who has lived through it all. I wrote some notes as I was going through this. He just had a son that tried to step in and take the kingdom while David was still alive, even though David had already named his son Solomon as his predecessor. His other son stepped in and tried to take over. David granted him mercy. We had a whole day last week that we talked about mercy, how David forgave over and over and over again, how people disrespected him, how they betrayed him, how they attempted to kill him. Hi, Mama. My mom's on with us this morning. I wasn't able to get my dad on the phone this morning. His phone was kind of acting funny. Good to see you, Mom. And how David just was so full of God that he forgave the unforgivable. We cannot forgive those who hurt us without God. It takes God. And what does it take to have God in us? Just a belief in who he is. And, the belief that he is who he says he is, that his son is who he said he was, making him Lord of our life, saying, okay, I'll do it God's way, not my way. And then, we're not going to be satisfied with that. We're going to want more. We were created that way. God created us with a great big God hole in the middle of us. And when we live our life and we do not fill ourselves full of God, then we're always feeling like that we've missed out on something. We're always feeling like we were mistreated. We always feel like life wasn't good enough when we don't fill the great big God hole that's inside us. I mean, we were created that way. All you have to do is look around and see what people attempt to do to fill their lives full of junk. There's my sister Carrie from Colorado on with us too. Yay. And there's lots of people on with us this morning. I love it when you guys put in the comments. I will tell you that right now I'm having a struggle with my phone. I do most of my follow-up to our ministry on my phone because I'm not always in front of a computer. And for some reason, in the last week, I haven't been able to go back to the videos, whether Debbie or Michelle or Lori was doing them. And I'm not able to go in and respond to the comment. In fact, I can't even see the comments. Donna's telling me she can't either. Maybe it's something with Facebook. So if you guys have been sending me message, I also haven't been able to retrieve my messages. I got notified that 2 people sent me a private message and I can't access my messages. And I've not been able to go in and make comments or even read the comments, but I'm hoping that all gets fixed. And because I love it when you guys put comments in there. And then, if this is a Bible study that has touched your life in any way, shape, or form, then they tell me that by interacting with us on these videos, that it causes it to spread out more. And we're growing. I mean, we are up to between 300 and 500 that's watching our videos every single day. There's been as many as 1,300, and that's just with no boosting, no ads, no anything. That's just because we do a video. The world needs God. The world needs these lessons in the life of David. The world needs to see God's way of forgiving people. The world needs to see God's way of relationships. The world needs to see God's definition of justice. And that's what we're reading about here as David is giving his final instructions to Solomon. And I find it interesting that David instructs Solomon to take care of people when he takes over the kingdom that David didn't take care of as king. And I prayed about that this morning, because as I've read this through the years, I've often wondered, well, Joab betrayed David. Is betrayal the right word? I looked up a commentary, and one of the commentaries said that Joab was fiercely loyal to David, yet he was quick to disobey David. The commentary went on to say that oftentimes it was when Joab thought he knew better than David knew. And of course, that's not the way a kingdom works. A kingdom works that you're supposed to obey the king no matter what. But regardless, his disobedience to David ended up with the killing of many people David didn't order to be killed. Chief among those was Abner, who was also fiercely loyal to David, and Joel killed him. And David did not, seemingly on the surface, did not deal with them. But this morning, as I was reading, and he's telling his son, his choice, God's choice, actually, let me put that in the right order. God's choice for the successor to David's kingdom was Solomon. David's choice for his successor as a king, he told Solomon to take care of Joab, to take care of the various ones. And so I wasn't really understanding it, and I prayed about it. And, as I continued to read, I had some thoughts that came to me. King David goes down in history as one of the mightiest men written about in the Bible. And King David didn't get to build the temple because of the amount of war, because of the blood that was on his hands. God restricted him from having the pleasure of building the temple for him because of that blood on his hands. David was wise in the ways of war. He was wise in the way of dealing with people. For 13 years, he ran from somebody he loved. He loved Saul. He laid down his life for Saul. And yet Saul turned wicked and attempted to kill him for 13 years. And David maintained a loyalty to him. David protected him. And then through all of the betrayal against David, his own sons coming against him, it was war after war after war after war, dealing with people after dealing with people after dealing with people. And as I read this morning, this thought came to me that David was full of God's mercy. David forgave people that as we read these stories, we say, well, I could never forgive that. And with man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. The Bible tells us that. But David lived his life in a way that most humans can't understand without God. And David was not intimidated, nor was he fooled by the likes of Joab and the others that he tells Solomon to take care of. And David knew that Joab didn't really pose a threat to the kingdom. And yet, if you read David's words to Solomon, he's telling Solomon, and he repeats the promise that God gave him, that as long as his people would obey God, there would always be a king on the throne. Of course, that's also a prophecy about King Jesus coming to earth. But I wonder, as any father does, they bring up their sons. They bring up their sons. They train their sons to be providers for their family, protectors of their family. King David brought up Solomon, young Solomon. He's still young in today's reading, to be the next king. So he trains him. And now David knows these are his last words. I don't know, as you read, did you detect any doubt? Is Solomon ready? Is he strong enough? Was there some insight that maybe had Solomon not taken care of Joab and the others that he told him to take care of, that maybe David knew that Solomon, in his inexperience as king, in his lack of war experience, his lack of dealing with people experience, saw that Joab in his disobedience could pose a threat. Of course, Joab also, I mean, he'd already showed his colors again, because he went with the other son that was declaring himself king. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns in reading in today's, but I think as we pray, we start getting insight. And I believe with everything in me, as we continue to read over and over again, this is a 1-year daily Bible that we read. We read it from front cover to back cover every year in a 365-day period of time. I believe that our knowledge grows and grows. King David knew Solomon would face great challenges, and he knew how much his son Solomon was going to need God. The promise to David from God was obedience, and he wanted Solomon to know he had to obey God. So why kill him now? Maybe David knew, but David knew his God, and he knew his God's strength, and he knew his own strength. And maybe he wasn't himself threatened, but maybe he knew that the threat was alive against Solomon. And so he just made it plain for his son what to do. He also told him to help those who helped me. Be loyal to those who were loyal to me. I mean, I could preach on that. I mean, I could keep going. Be loyal to those who are loyal. I mean, we're always faced with opportunities to be disloyal, to turn on somebody that has always been by our side. Life happens. Upsets happen. Miscommunication happens. And David was telling him, help those who helped me. And then I look at the life of David as I'm examining his final words, and I wrote down several words that I think describes King David. He was a shepherd. He was a soldier. There was a time he was an outlaw. The king in place was trying to kill him and he had to run. He was an outlaw. He was a king. He was a fugitive at times. David was a sinner. He's no different than you and I. He was a sinner. David was a friend. He was a loyal friend. He really gives us what a wonderful example of loyal friendship that David gives to us. He was a general. Can't read what that word. Oh, he was a poet. Couldn't read that word. He was a poet. He was a father. He was a husband. He was a saint. But the bottom line is God's own words to describe King David was he was a man after God's heart. Powerful. And then Solomon takes over. And here David has chosen not to kill the son who tried to take over the kingdom. He grants him mercy. So he's been given a second chance. And what does Adonijah, I hope I said that, Adonijah, what does he do with it? He goes to King David's wife, Bathsheba, and says he wants to marry one of David's concubines. So I didn't quite understand that from reading the text, so I did do just a little bit of research on that. And it's amazing when we take the time to truly dig in and do Bible study. Most of the time, guys, I'm telling you, I'm running some businesses around here. I have ministry. I've got people in my home because we office here at the home. I keep my schedule busy. I keep my schedule full. I'm just being transparent with y'all. Most of the time in the mornings, I don't do what Debbie does. I don't know that I've ever had a 4 Bible morning. Just being honest. I love and admire and I glean all the tidbits that Debbie gives us with her incredible Bible study. But most of the time I read. More times than not, I only read once. I've been better in the last couple of years. I read, sometimes I'll read it the night before and I read it again in the morning. And I've got any more where I do listen to it, maybe once or twice. I think I've listened to today's study 3 times. I've read it twice. It's unusual. I took time. I got up a little extra early this morning. I did some research. And in the research, as I'm reading about it, I dug and found out that it is written, and in fact, today's text has context that is documented back in the book of Exodus on the way things are done, the traditions that is carried down and what's supposed to be done. But what I really found was that throughout history, when a kingdom was overthrown, it was customary that the king who came in and overthrew the other presiding king, as a show of his might and of his new reign, he would take over the wives of the standing king, or the overthrown king, I should say. And so when Adonijah came to Bathsheba boldly and declared that he was going to marry, he wanted to marry, he even asked for permission. I mean, the audacity of that, to ask permission to marry one of David's concubines. It was absolutely positively a sign that he intended to continue to overthrow the kingdom. And boy, that made things much clearer to me about today's reading. So I've also clear back to 2018, I made my first note about when Bathsheba said, yes, I'll go to the king. More than likely, she wanted to go to Solomon because she's completely supported her son as king. She wanted King Solomon to know what the request was. But I love how when she approached him, how he honored his mama. Just so much in that, so much to that. Then we go on and we continue to read. We read about what Solomon did, the actions he took, how he set out, first of all, to obey David's instructions, how Solomon prayed to God and only asked for wisdom. And then I love the ending of today's reading in Kings, chapter 2, verse 46, I guess. So the kingdom was now firmly in Solomon's grip. God declared Solomon to be the next king. David put it in place. David issued orders to make sure that his reign didn't start out the way King Saul's reign started and the way King David's reign started. Both of those kingdoms started with opposition against them, major opposition. In fact, King David reigned over a divided kingdom for 7 years before it was all united under him. And so when Solomon obeyed and did some things that wasn't quite comfortable, I'm sure, did some very difficult things, then the Bible tells us, so the kingdom was now firmly in Solomon's grip. And we're going to get to read in the coming days about the reign of King Solomon. And King Solomon is the one that wrote most of the Proverbs for us, and he continues this day and will forever be the wisest man that ever lived on the face of the earth, because God asked him what he wanted, and he was given an opportunity to pray for most anything, and instead he prayed and asked for wisdom. That's so powerful, so powerful. And so God granted him wisdom, and it is written that there has never been and will never be a man as wise as Solomon. And so the fact that Solomon wrote things down for us and that we can glean from that wisdom, oh my goodness, I'm so grateful for that. And then we move to Acts chapter 5, and here is the story of Ananias and Sapphira. Sapphira, I think it's Sapphira. What a story. So Jesus has already been crucified. He's already resurrected and ascended to heaven. And now we're about doing life. And Ananias, whose name means in Hebrew, God is gracious. That's the meaning of Ananias's name. I found that interesting. God is gracious. And then Sapphira or Sapphira in the Greek means beautiful. It's interesting that he sold some property and there was no mandate on him to bring the money to the temple. There was no law that said he had to bring all of that to the temple. He had declared that he was going to give it all to God. And then he and his wife lie about it. And I just, had the thoughts of how many times do we say and do things to make ourselves seem more holy than what we really are. I've actually at times had some people say things about maybe I shouldn't be quite so transparent with my own life when I'm on these videos, that maybe I should keep some of those things to myself, and yet I just know that everybody struggles. Everybody struggles. There were times in my life when I would look at my mentors or my leaders or those who I admired so much, and I was deceived for a bit, thinking, oh, they got it all together. I mean, their life is perfect. They raised perfect kids. They never had trouble. Their kids never had trouble. They're just perfect. And on the surface, that's what it looked like, only to find out. I'll never forget one. She was a worship leader at our church, sang like an angel, prophesied, gave words of knowledge, prayed for people, like had a prayer. Oh, and then lo and behold, I find out that her oldest son suffered from drug addiction, broke into their house, stole from them, threatened them. It was like, somebody like that has problems like that. I just think that being real helps people. I don't mind coming on and letting you guys know that there's times I struggle. There's times that I gotta be on my knees an extra amount. There's times that I pray and I don't hear. It's probably the reason why I continually remind you guys that my belief is that God's always speaking to us. Those times that I pray and I don't hear, it's not because God's not speaking to me. And I know that. I know he's answering my every prayer. I just get at a place that I'm not able to hear for whatever reason. And here Ananias and Sapphira has sold some property and they've got a lot of money. And they just boldly said, I'm going to give it to the temple. I'm going to give it to the church. And then they lie about it. They change their mind and lie about it. And it cost them their life. This was a physical death. But when we do that, when we do that, it costs us our life. It may not be a physical death that happens, but I'm reminded of Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 19, that says, I set before you this day blessings and curses, life and death. And then he gives us the answer and he says, choose life. Every day we're faced with a decision. Am I going to choose God's way? Am I going to forgive the way David forgave? Am I going to love the way David loved? David loved Saul even when he was trying to kill him. Or am I going to do it Ananias's way? Or am I going to do it like Solomon's brother? I can't think of his name, Adonijah. Am I going to do it Ananias's way? We always have a choice. We always have a choice. You know, I found a quote about the story of Ananias and Sapphira. I've already posted it on my Facebook. It really, really spoke to me. It's by a man named Horton, and I don't even know who Horton is, but I gave him credit for the quote. Once the love of money takes possession of a person, there is no evil he cannot or will not do. Wow. Greed has caused so much harm. And I think as we read this, every last one of us, regardless of where you are on your journey with the Lord, should stop and reflect and say, oh Lord, am I guilty? Is there a love for money in my heart? Anywhere, Father, is there greed? Is there pride? Am I misrepresenting my holiness to people? Am I on the narrow path, or have I fallen into a ditch? Search my heart, O Lord, and see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me on the path of righteousness. And then we'll go to, I want to finish up at the end of Acts today, because it's talking about, Peter and the apostles getting thrown in jail, and then all of a sudden around verse 29, but Peter and the apostles replied, we must obey God rather than any human authority. Even with Ananias and Sapphira, one of the things I wrote down this year was submission does not extend unto sin. I'm a big proponent of godly submission to my husband, a godly submission to my husband, God's way, not the way the world describes that. Because as I submit to my husband, he raises me up as an equal. In the Bible, if you read in the Bible about marriage, he tells us to submit one to another before he tells the women to submit to their husbands. But submission does not extend unto sin. And then this theme kind of continues on in the reading and in the Acts. The God of our ancestor raised Jesus from the dead after you killed him by hanging on a cross. Verse 31, then God put him in the place of honor at his right hand as Prince and Savior. He did this so the people of Israel would repent of their sins and be forgiven. We are witnesses of these things, and so is the Holy Spirit who is given by God to those who obey him. When they heard this, the high council was furious and decided to kill him. We're going to kill him for proclaiming Jesus. But one member, a Pharisee named Gamaliel, who was an expert in religious law and respected by all the people, stood up and ordered that the men be sent outside the council chamber for a while. This is powerful. Listen to this, because we're all faced with controversy inside the church. We're constantly, the churches are being ripped apart, and one group will go this way and this group will go this way, or there's sin. We have a fallen leader who had an affair, or a fallen leader who stole money, or we're faced with the same thing in our neighborhoods, in our friendships. I mean, there's controversy, conflict all the time. And I love this story. So he ordered the men to be sent outside the chamber for a while. And then this is what he said to his colleagues. Men of Israel, take care what you're planning to do to these men. Some time ago, there was that fellow Thaddeus who pretended to be someone great. He pretended to be somebody great. Oh, Ananias. Oh, okay, back to the story. About 400 others joined him, but he was killed, and all his followers went their various way. The whole movement came to nothing. See, we got a little stink bug on our shoulder that's constantly saying, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do about that? You got to do something. You better do something. You better do something. And that little stink bug on our shoulder goads us into taking action or saying words that never should have been said. Just because you get angry does not mean you have a right to speak. 400 others joined him, but he was killed, and all his followers went their various ways. The whole movement came to nothing. He goes on to say, after him, at the time of the census, there was Judas of Galilee, and he got people to follow him, but he was killed too, and all his followers were scattered. So here's the point in today's reading, verse 38. So my advice is, leave those men alone. Let them go. If they're planning and doing these things merely on their own, it will soon be overthrown. Who are we to think we can rise up and declare that that pastor is evil, that that pastor is a cult leader, that that pastor is preaching wrong things? Who are we to declare that my church is better than your church? Who are we to say that you're wrong and I'm right? Who made us God? Let them go. If they're planning on doing these things merely on their own, it will soon be overthrown. But if it's from God, you will not be able to overthrow them. You may even find yourselves fighting against God. There's something to the saying of live and let live. Stop thinking you got to fix everybody's problems. Even more so, Elizabeth, stop thinking you got to correct every wrong, that you got to be right all the time. Stop thinking that you're the one that's right. It'll all work out in the wash. God is still God. God is God. You know how much comfort there is in that? Do you know how just saying those words, so you've got somebody that rises against you and you want to fix it, or you want to put them in their place, or you want to, God is God. Man. So my advice is this: leave these men alone. Let them go. If they're planning and doing these things merely on their own, it will soon be overthrown. But if it's from God, you will not be able to overthrow them. You may even find yourself fighting against God. If you're in the middle of God's good and perfect will, no devil in hell can come against you. It's not always easy just because you're obeying God. He is always going to keep us in a place that we're totally dependent on him. With man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. You look at the life of David and say, I can't forgive the way he forgives. You're right, you can't. But when you turn to God and say, God, I don't even know what that forgiveness looks like, help me, he will help you every time. Well, God, you don't know what that person's done to me. I can't love that person. Well, you're right. You can't. But the God in you, it's why we need God. This life is full of all these evil things. God doesn't tell us that we live in a world where everybody will treat us good. God doesn't tell us that we live in a world where everything will be just. He doesn't tell us that we're going to live in a world where everything will be easy. He tells us we're going to live in a fallen world. The enemy's going to come against you. They're going to persecute you. They're going to want to kill you. They're going to want to stone you. They're going to want to betray you. They're going to insult you. They're going to persecute you. Count it great joy. Count it great joy. I mean, did you read in today's reading that when they were put in prison and they were released supernaturally, that they rejoiced because they were able to suffer for the sake of the gospel? They counted it great joy. They rejoice. Do you rejoice when somebody does you wrong? Or do you want to get revenge? You want to rise up and defend yourself, don't you? That's not God's way. That is not God's way. Oh, I could keep going. This was just so good today. Psalms 125, those who trust in the Lord are as secure as Mount Zion. If we could just get that truth in our heart, that I trust in the Lord and no weapon formed against me will prosper. It doesn't matter how you insult me. It doesn't matter how you come against me. It doesn't matter if you lie about me. It doesn't matter if you steal from me. It doesn't matter if you try to kill me. It doesn't matter if you hurt my children. It doesn't matter if what you fill in the blanks. The truth is, and it's written down for us, those who trust in the Lord are as secure as Mount Zion. They will not be defeated, but will endure forever. No weapon formed against me will prosper. There's nothing you can do to me to hurt me when I'm secure and I trust God. Wow. Now, am I there yet? Nope. Am I better today than I was 10 years ago? You better believe it. And I don't even look the same. I'm not even recognizable where I was 20 years ago when I first started reading this book. I'm not where I need to be, but thank God I'm not where I used to be. I'm making progress because I choose God every day. I wake up every day and say, Lord, this is your day. Your day. Help me to do what you want me to do this day. Help me to love the way you want me to love this day. Choose love every time. You'll never fail when you choose love. Love trumps all sins. Love covers a multitude of sins. Love casts out perfect fear. It all begins and ends with love. And this book shows us this day after day after day. Choose love.